Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, welcome to another monthly reading wrap up. This is going to be all of the books that I read in November, plus my very ambitious December TBR. November was a great reading month for me. I got through all of these books, it's quite the stack. I also have quite the lengthy TBR for December, so I'm going to try and go through this hopefully pretty quickly. I started off November with an absolutely amazing book. I started with Children of Virtue and Vengeance. This book is by Tomi Adeyemi. I think I'm saying that hopefully close to correct. This is the second book in the Children of Orisha series, and I gave this book 5 stars. I really liked it. Basically what the series is it's set in a fictional Nigeria is probably the best way to put it, where there used to be magic, but then magic was taken away by the king, and so she now has the opportunity to bring magic back. So the first book is following that whole plot of them trying to bring magic back. I can't really say too much of the plot of this book, but it pretty much picks up not too long after the events. Actually, it might even... I think there's a little bit of a gap, but it's not too long after the events of that, and you're basically seeing all the aftermath of everything that happened in book 1. I thought it was super good. It is a fast read. There's lots of really fun magic. I think the magic system in this book is really cool. I love the setting of Africa. It's just super fun. It's a great vibe. The only thing that I will say about this is an unfinished trilogy, and the third book does not come out until June next year. So I don't know if I would recommend anyone start this book right now, because it does end up on a pretty big cliffhanger and I just really need to know what happens. So I will probably be pre-ordering it. The cover and the pre-order at Barnes & Noble looks really cool, so I might go and just pre-order it because I'm so excited to read the third book. I think this one is a great fantasy series, would highly recommend. And then I kind of switched gears after that and I picked up Xenocide by Orson Scott Card. This is book 3 in the Ender's Game saga. Is that... I think the main series is the Ender's Game saga, and then the whole thing is the Ender's Verse. I'm a little confused on it, but this is book 3. So essentially, if you don't know, book 1 is following Ender, and he's this child that basically gets recruited as a child soldier, and he goes to this school where they're learning to fight off these aliens. So it's like classic sci-fi. Book 2 is following Ender, the main character, kind of in post book 1, and then this one picks up almost immediately after where book 3 ends up. In fact, it might be immediately after book 3 and just continues the storyline. This one got very heavy in the science. I feel like the first one was your classic war, fight the aliens. Your second one was very philosophical, should we kill the aliens? And then this one was very into science. It covers lots of philosophy still, lots of physics, lots of genetics, biology, all that sorts of stuff is happening a ton. There is a new world introduced in this one called Path, and it's based all off of Taoism, I think is the religion that it's based off of. It's very Chinese. That was a really interesting addition. One of the main characters in this book is also AI, which is interesting, or a form of AI. She's not actual AI like what we have now, but overall, I really like the Ender's Game saga so far. I will definitely be continuing. I think I have 1 or 2 more in the main series, and then I can start branching out into some of the more the prequels and the other things that go on in this universe. But I gave this book 3.5 stars. I just think it's definitely not a fast read. You're not going to these other books for super fast-paced war sci-fi. This is more all the hypotheticals and the science sci-fi. Book 1 was a little more war sci-fi, but it's a little bit of a slower read, and I will say the science got a little heavy, and this is the most confused I've been in any of the books. It's enough that I could kind of get what was going on, but it's definitely a lot harder to understand than the first 2 were for me. So we'll see how book 4 is. I still am definitely going to read it, but this one was a little harder to understand than some of the other ones. So that's Xenocide by Orson Scott Card. I continued a lot of series in the beginning of November. Basically, actually every book I read in November is part of a series, but the next one that I read was Inferno by Dan Brown. This is part of the Robert Langdon series. It's got Angels and Demons and Da Vinci Code are the most popular ones. And then the one right before this is called The Lost Symbol, and then Inferno. So this is book 4. I gave this one 4.5. This was definitely up there and one of my more favorites ones. I still think Angels and Demons, the first one, is my favorite. Da Vinci Code was alright. I think it got spoiled a little bit considering I'd seen the movie first. And then I didn't like The Lost Symbol as much. But this one was really fun because he's kind of had a set system of how the books go. He gets called in by somebody, there's been a murder or there's going to be a murder, they need him to talk about some symbols, they explain everything to him, and then you get going with the plot. There's some scientist lady that he's going around with, and that's kind of how every book, or the first 3 books go. You really kind of know what's going on. This book starts with him waking up in a hospital, having no clue how he got there or where he is or what is going on. All of a sudden people are chasing him, trying to kill him. And so you're following him with this book. He's got no clue what's going on. It's not one of the things where they sit down and explain everything at the beginning of the book. You're figuring it all out along with him. And so that was a fun switch up. I liked that it was kind of different. This one's set in Italy, which is super fun. He does still have the girl that he goes around with, but there's a lot more plot twists in this one. It's not quite as straightforward as the other ones. People are a little more complicated, and there's not like a specific religious organization that he's fighting against either. This one's all centered around Dante's Inferno, but it's not like the other ones. Like the first one's Illuminati, second one is Opus Dei, third one is the Masons, and then this one kind of drops that whole thing. There is this like shadow organization, but it's not like a religious organization at all. So this one kind of breaks the mold, which was fun. Very fast paced. I did kind of call one of the plot twists, but I didn't get the full extent of it or any of the other several things that were going on in this book. So this one's fun. I really liked it. I quite enjoy the Robert Langdon series. I've got one more book and I'm saving that one for a rainy day, I guess. So I do like that they wrap up at the end. It's not like an ongoing plot. They wrap up enough that you can kind of save them for when you need a good fast-paced thriller book. Okay, that was the end of me reading or continuing series, and then the next 2 books I actually started a new series. The first one that I started was Shadow and Bone. This one is kind of gets a lot of hate on YouTube. I feel like a lot of people skip the Shadow and Bone trilogy and just go straight into Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. But I just quite frankly could not bring myself to do that because I feel like you miss all the world building that happens in this series. And I'm so glad I didn't. I actually really enjoyed it. Basically what this book is, because I feel like no one ever says what it's about. You have this world where some people have magical powers, some people don't. The people with magical powers are pretty much given a life of luxury. Everybody else gets recruited into the army. And so you have these 2 orphans at the beginning of the book who get tested. Turns out they don't have magical powers. They end up in the army. And then there's this place called the Shadowfold, which basically has divided their kingdom in half, so they don't have access to a lot of their imports and exports unless you get across the Shadowfold, which is lots of dangerous stuff, and people have basically always died. There's something sort of like dragons in there. They're not actually dragons. But she goes to go across it, one of the orphans, and all of a sudden they find out that she has magic powers. And so she goes to then join the Grisha. Is that what it is? Yeah, the Grisha. This is why it's called the Grishaverse. And she basically gets thrown into this much more complicated life than she thought she had before. So it's pretty much your classic just YA fantasy. So if you want just like a nice cleanser book, I would say this is the one. I think my one complaint about this book is the pacing is so fast-paced, which is good, but I feel like some stuff got skipped over, and I wish she would have gone a little more in detail. Like this is not your like descriptive, flowery, super detailed writing. This is pretty much like, here's what happened, we're just flying along with plot. Which I liked. Like, I'm a plot person. I'm not really here for like the character story arcs as much as I am here for the plot. So I quite enjoyed it. I initially gave it 3.5 stars, and I was like, it was an okay book. But then I went to read my next book and I just kept thinking about this one. I'm still thinking about it. I would love to go back and read the rest of the series, but I've got a whole stack of books I want to read first. So I've bumped it up to a 4.5. I actually think it was so good. I loved the like Eastern European Russian setting that it's kind of got going. It's a little more unique than I think some fantasy settings are in. And I just thought it was a really good book. So I don't know. So far I think you should not skip Shadow and Bone. I obviously need to read the rest of the trilogy, but I will hopefully be doing that, if not this year, which is probably unlikely with how many books I'm trying to read, but early next year I hope to get to the rest of the trilogy. And then the last book that I read is the ever so popular Renegades by Marissa Myers. This one, unlike Xenocide, is your just classic sci-fi superhero book. People have powers, there used to be the villains, they literally call them the villains, and then you have these good guy superheroes who came in and made a council, and you're following one character who's from the villains and one character who's from the superheroes. They call them the Renegades, hence the title. Yeah, but basically you're just following the two of them as they go head to head. She's trying to take out the Renegades and he's obviously trying to be a renegade. So I don't want to say too much. This book was a little slow for me to get into. I just didn't really care, to be honest, and I was kind of coming off Shadow and Bone and I just really wanted to read the second one, so I probably should have just done that. But it did pick up. About halfway through I did finally get to the point where I was like, okay, I'm enjoying this, it was fun. I think my biggest problem with this book was it was just like you're following these characters around. There wasn't much of a plot. I was like, where's the bigger picture? How does this become a trilogy? I still don't fully understand what the next book is gonna be. Like, I have no idea. I ended up giving this a 3.75. I don't normally go that specific in my ratings, but it wasn't really a 3.5. It's better than some books that I've rated that, but it definitely wasn't a 4. It wasn't as good as those books, so 3.75 is what I've settled on. And that's the Renegades. I get why people like it, but I personally am not as into it as a lot of people have been. I probably will continue the series eventually, but it's not super, super high on my list. Okay, those were all the books that I read in November. Now let's quickly go through my very, very ambitious December TBR. I have 9 books on my TBR. I don't know that I've read that many any month this year, but we'll see. The first books that I am going to read is The Hunger Games. I won't say too much about this because I am filming a whole reading vlog, but I have never read The Hunger Games before. And so I want this month to try and get through The Hunger Games for the first time as an adult, and I'm going to do a whole reading vlog on that, so watch out for this coming. So my first 4 books on my TBR are The Hunger Games, Catching Fire, Mockingjay, and then The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is on its way. I don't have the copy yet. It is gonna be here at some point. So that's the first chunk of books. Then the second chunk of books that I have is for another video that I'm hoping to do. I've got a few up on my channel so far of the series of reading books around the world. Around the World of Books is what I'm calling it. And so I've done North America, I've done South America. My next one that I want to film is Southeast Asia. I have all the books for it. A couple of these I've had for a while sitting on my shelf. I just needed one more to make like a complete video. These ones are all pretty short, so I think I should be able to do it. The first one is The God of Small Things. This one is from India. I honestly don't know hardly anything about it. It's crazy popular. I've seen it everywhere. And even having read descriptions of it, I still am not entirely sure what this book is about. So that's The God of Small Things. And then the next one is First They Killed My Father. This is my pick for Cambodia. It is a memoir of the daughter of one of the politicians that was killed in their, it was when the Pol Pot regime kind of took over. Her dad got killed and then she became a child soldier. So it's her whole story. So this one might be a little heavy. I'm a little scared about this one. But the last book that I have for that is a fantasy book that I'm so excited to read. This is The High Auction. It's my pick for some country. I actually can't even remember what country it's from now. I'm super excited about it. This author is also the illustrator, so super cool. It's super tiny, so I should be able to get through this one relatively quick. The next book that I want to read is Hercule Poirot's Christmas. I love Agatha Christie, trying to read as many of hers as I can, so I figured this would be a good time to pick up the Christmas one. And this one actually is set on like specific dates. Like it's divided up instead of chapters into dates. And so I might try and read it on the dates. That will be like the slowest that I ever have read one of her books, I think. But I think it'd be kind of fun to read it on the days. So it starts December 22nd and ends on the 28th. So I have a little while till I'll probably pick that one up. And then the last one, and the one that really makes this TBR ambitious, is I want to read Dr. Zhivago. This cover is so cool. I found this copy at at Half Price Books while we were out at the East Coast for the summer, and the spine actually tells you what book it is. It's got a bookmark and everything. It's super cool. But this one is a classic. I honestly don't know if I've read a single classic this year yet, so I'd like to get at least one on the list. And I've been wanting to read this one for a while. I've listened to some of the music from the musical. I can't quite bring myself to watch the movie. I think I'd rather read the book. It is a nice 523 pages of classic old Russian literature. I have read War and Peace. It's right there. That one took me like a couple months to read, so I don't know how realistic this is to get through it. It just feels like such a perfect winter read. So I'm hoping that I can kind of finish up the year reading this book, get a nice classic in there. Something about Russian literature is just so intriguing to me, and so I'm excited to read another one. I actually really liked War and Peace, so I'm hoping I will also really like this one, but this is really what makes my TBR ambitious. So that is all the books I'm hoping to read in December. If I manage to do it, that'll put me to a solid 80 books that I read this year, which is crazy because last year I read 36. So I will be more than doubling how much I read. Look forward to those books. If you have read any of these books that I read or am planning to read, I'd love to know your thoughts or any other recommendations that you have for me for into the new year. I'm getting a rough TBR of kind of the books I want to read overall next year, but if you have any suggestions, I would love them. So leave your comments below, and thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye.